Welcome to Football Discussion Daily. My name is Joe, and I'm here with the co-host
Gio.
CGO or George. We're releasing this on the 13th of May, 2026. Quick reminder, please like us, subscribe us. We release every day on YouTube, long form, every day on Instagram, TikTok, and other platforms, short form. In news today, Real Madrid, the otherwise drama-free club, had quite a bit of drama today as Florentino Perez hosted a press conference where he's basically like, why do you guys don't like me? There's also all these rumors flying around that they are hiring famously drama-free coach Josep Mourinho as their next coach. He was coaching them for 3 years, from 2010 through 2013. He, relatively successful. I think there's a lot of context there that he set the backbone for a lot of success by Ancelotti and Zidane in terms of play style, in terms of mentality. But trophy-wise, he was also going against one of the best teams ever. George and I will talk about that. Crystal Palace play Man City in the Premier League on Wednesday, which is obviously evident in the title race. But George, let's talk about Real Madrid and Jose Mourinho. Do you feel like this is a good move for Real Madrid?
For a team like Real Madrid, they need an experienced coach, a coach that can stamp his authority in the dressing room, a coach that can humble players' ego. And if you look at the coaches that are in this rank, it's the likes of Mourinho. Mourinho is 63 years old. He's not a young coach. He's an experienced coach. So I think if Mourinho comes in, probably we might see the glory days of Real Madrid. Because remember, the last manager that did so well with Real Madrid was Carlo Ancelotti. Carlo Ancelotti is an experienced coach. He was able to manage the dressing room very well until he left the club and then joined the Brazilian national team. So I think that will help the Real Madrid team, because the way things are, you notice that young coaches that have come to manage the club, the likes of Xabi Alonso, number one, didn't get full support from the board of Real Madrid when it comes to having the ability to control the players. And then we had Abeloa coming in, who is also a young coach. You see how he has struggled. We've heard about a lot of fracas, a lot of controversy in the dressing room. So what it shows is that these guys don't really have control over the players. So you need a coach like Jose Mourinho, who has been tested and trusted when it comes to managing players of high caliber.
I do wonder, because Mourinho obviously can control players of our generation, George, the generation in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, guys who played 15, 20, 30 years ago. I'm not sure that this generation, I don't know if it's the personalities in the Madrid locker room. I don't know if it's a generational thing. Mourinho has not been a bad coach the last 10 years, but he was, one of the best coaches in the world from 2004 to 2016, 17, until he got sacked by Chelsea the second time. And I don't feel like his career since then has been one of all-time manager. Obviously, from 2003 to 2017 or so, one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in the world in that time frame. And I think that Mourinho still exists, that Mourinho is still capable of instilling a mentality in a team, getting guys to walk through them. Getting guys to run through walls for him, I think, was one of his specialities and one thing he was really good at. I think it'll be really interesting to see him do it in a higher profile job. Turkey, I'm sure there's pressure within the country, but I don't think it's necessarily as big exposure as Real Madrid. Neither is Portugal. Neither is Roma. Tottenham. I think a lot of coaches would have failed at Tottenham. So I don't consider his time at Tottenham or Manchester United a failure personally.
But remember when he was at Tottenham, he got to the final of the Carabao Cup, and they refused to allow him to coach the team. And till today, he has not forgiven the Daniel Levy for making him not to handle that game, possibly to get a trophy at least for Tottenham. So he did his best at Tottenham, if I still remember, but unfortunately things didn't go well. with
Yeah.
him and the management. So he was asked to leave.
And at Manchester United, an example, he had two locked players in that locker room, Rashford and Pogba, that were not professional. Let's be frank. Um, Marcus Rashford actually, would party and go to an orphanage and skip training and say stuff like, "Oh, I went to an orphanage yesterday. I'm the best guy ever," and Mourinho was got fed up with it. I think with Pogba as well. Him and Mourinho had a big falling out. I do think that some of these personalities in the Madrid locker room are more comparable to that than Mourinho did a great job in Inter and Real Madrid the first time managing these players. I think he continued with I think his fallout in terms of when he left Madrid the first time was with leadership. I don't think it was with the players, if I remember right. And I do think it'll be interesting to see if his relationship with the Real Madrid players, who do seem like more like that Rashford and Pogba situation in terms of their impact in the locker room, if that's what Mourinho experiences. Because again, Vinicius is probably the biggest one, but also this whole Tchouaméni Valverde shakeup does not indicate that those are the most mature players in terms of how they're handling their internal drama. I'm very curious how Madrid will handle that.
But if the news I'm getting is that Mourinho is trying to get the Real Madrid board to give him full support, and then to answer off when it comes to decision making on who plays and what happens in the dressing room. So I believe he has a reason for this, and also getting involved when it comes to the issue of transfer. So there are conditions he's also giving the Real Madrid board before he'll be willing to fully take charge. I'm sure he's doing that based on what the likes of Xabi Alonso has gone through, the likes of Abaloa, what they've gone through. So I'm sure he doesn't want to fall into the same pit. That's why he's trying to make sure these things are sorted out before
Of
he finally
course.
signs for the
But
club.
George, I will say, like, Tchouaméni and Valverde, there's a dozen clubs at Europe who can afford him, who will pay the wages, who would absolutely take him. These are fantastic players. Vinicius Jr. is a fantastic player. There's not a single club in Europe who both can afford him, needs him, and will go after him and will pay the wages. Not a single club. There's nowhere he can go in Europe based on just wages alone, unless he's willing to cut his wages, which he isn't. And there's been indications that he has been a difficult personality with Xabi Alonso. Obviously, the Clasico this past year was one way that bubbled up, but there's a lot more smoke there in terms of his challenge. I do think that that's a player that Mourinho will be stuck with. He won't have a choice to get rid of. I think that again, too many. There's rumors about him going to Manchester United and Premier League suitors. He's a fantastic talent. As with Valverde, any team in the world, would be improved by Valverde. He can play any position, 8 out of 10, any week. He runs his butt off, and has energy for days. He's also a fantastic player. So we'll see how Mourinho handles Vinicius, who is a big personality in that locker room.
And let's see how it goes. But I know when it comes to being a disciplinarian as a coach, you see Mourinho has that record of being a disciplinarian. So all he needs is if the board can give him the support he needs, I'm sure what the worst that will happen is he will have to get rid of some players who are not ready to comply with his rules.
Yeah,
And that's the way you can get the best from the coach.
I will say too, there's a fundamental hole in the Real Madrid squad. They have a very, very talented midfield who's capable of a lot of different things. What they don't have in the midfield is a guy who can just control the game, just make simple passes, and like when they need to, and like if you're up in a game, make the game a lot more slower. If you're down in a game, make it more frenetic. Kroos, Modric were great at that. They didn't keep Modric. Xabi Alonso told the board last summer, "Get me Zubimendi or keep Modric." Or a guy like Zubimendi. He didn't demand Zubimendi. He's like, we need a player with this profile in the team. Fiorentina refused. Maybe they changed their tune. They sign a guy. There's tons of guys out there with that profile. Not many as good as none as good as Modric. Not many as good as Zubimendi, who's a fantastic player too. But those players exist and they're out there. McAllister is a guy who can do that, who's been rumored to Madrid. He's been poor at Liverpool this season. Maybe a change of pace would be good for him. Might be available. I don't know, but he's a name that's been thrown out there. A player like that could, who again, quality wise, there's Bellingham's a better player in my opinion, but the profile of McAllister is missing at Madrid. Could be really helpful for a new manager, regardless of who it is. I do think Mourinho has a really sharp insight into what that is. Might have leverage in order to get that, given the failures of Madrid the last 2 seasons in terms of trophies. So
No, Joe, I remember we talked about this, I think I think a month ago or so, where we talked about one of the challenge this current Real Madrid team is facing is they don't have they don't have that balance when it
no,
comes to players. They have quality players, but there's balance lacking, especially in the midfield. So when you don't
and
have a player like Pedri that can dictate the tempo of a game, we saw the likes of Tony Cruz, the likes of Luka Modric do things like that. They were able to dictate the pace of a game. If they want the game to be highly intense, they can do that. If they want it to slow down, they can do that. We saw Pedri do that when Barcelona played against Real Madrid in the El Clasico. After they were 2-0 up, he had to slow
Pedri's
down everything.
fantastic. He's just
Yeah.
fantastic.
So Real Madrid need a player who has similar profile with Tony Cruz or
Yep.
Luka Modric. They don't have that currently.
Every top team who expects to go into a game and possess 55-60% of the ball, which is a lot, needs that profile of player in their
Yes.
squad in order to control a game. It's just a reality of football in 2026. I will say, I do feel like there is player leadership within the locker room. Like when I talk about the Chelsea locker room lacking player leadership, which might lead to accountability issues, I do see that in this Real Madrid team. I do think that Rudiger and Mbappe are actually pretty good leaders. I do feel like there's other guys in that team who are keeping Tchouaméni and Valverde accountable. I do think that locker room stuff will work itself out. This is strictly a profile on the pitch type thing. George,
Joe,
huh?
I have a question for you. Do you think if, let's assume Mourinho is announced as the coach of Real Madrid, do you think he needs to take a similar step like Luis Enrique? Remember at some point, Luis Enrique had to tell a player like Mbappe that he's free to leave because one of the problems Mbappe had when he was at PSG when Enrique came on board was that Kylian Mbappe wasn't that player that knows how to do high press. He wasn't that kind of a player. So at the end of the day, I think Enrique had to tell him no, he's free to leave. And you see, after he allowed him to leave, you can see that the players he has now, most of them, especially the front guys, you see the level of high press they do is something that is so commendable. Do you think Jose Mourinho would have to do the same with this Madrid team where you have a lot of players with so much ego?
I think he's stuck with Mbappe. I think that there's not a single team in Europe that can afford him, pay his wages, needs him, and will go get him. I just don't think that's a thing that happens. He's stuck with Mbappe and Vinicius. I do think Mourinho is a genius at what Mourinho does differently than other coaches is he's okay with pissing his players off. Like he's not here to be buddies with his friends. Like he'll go and be like, Mbappe, like we suck because you don't do this in front of everybody. Call him out. Get Mbappe angry. And Mbappe is the guy who's going to respond and be fired up. I feel like, but again, we will see. I do feel like Mourinho is going to take that approach. I do think that Mourinho knows that he's stuck with Mbappe. But we will see, George. George, quick question back to you. Do you think next year Mourinho run Madrid with a player of the profile we just talked about, such as Alexis McAllister, who might be available this summer? Do you feel like a Madrid who's largely unchanged would win La Liga or Champions League?
I believe with a coach like Mourinho, I think they stand a very good chance because what this Real Madrid team need is just if they are able to achieve stability. That way they are able to achieve, let me say, balance in the squad, and then there's high level of discipline, which I believe Jose Mourinho is going to inculcate in the players. I believe they are going to give Barcelona a very big fight next coming season. They won't find it easy because we knew what Mourinho did the last time he was at Madrid. I think that was over 13 years ago. He
Yep,
came in the
2010.
first season. The first season, he couldn't win the league, but the second season, he gave them a very big fight and he was able to win the league. So even
And
if
being
he's not able
honest,
to get it next season, if they allow him to take over the next 2 seasons, I believe he's going to win the league.
that first season, that 2010 2011 season, number one, that Barcelona team, in my opinion, is the best team I've ever seen. That was the season they had David Villa. They got rid of I think they definitely got rid of Eto'o. It was before Zlatan got there. It's David Villa. It was in there. Pedro is not as good of a player as Neymar or some of these other guys that walked into Barcelona over the years, but he worked well with Villa and Messi. It was just the best team I've ever seen. And that Madrid team got to the semifinals of the Champions League, I believe, lost to Barcelona, got 95 points, something like that. Crazy in La Liga. Madrid got 100. Barcelona got 100. That was an exceptional team. I think it took Mourinho a full year to instill the belief of, yes, you can compete on every single front with this Barcelona team. Yes. And they did it, and it was just exceptional. That team before 2010, 2011 actually hadn't won a knockout game in Europe, a knockout round. I think it was like 4 or 5 years. They hadn't gotten out of the round of 16. I remember they got stomped by Liverpool 2 years beforehand. A Liverpool that was not its peak, like a Liverpool that had that was getting fourth every year. Real Madrid got wrecked by them. I know they got beat by Lyon 1 year. Again, it's a decent team, but now they shouldn't be beating Madrid in the Champions League. So it was a very different Madrid team, kind of similar to, there are some parallels to this current Madrid team, which obviously the talent and quality is there. The mentality, sometimes I question whether it's there. So does most people who watch the team. And Mourinho can really instill that mentality. And even if he does that in a year and doesn't win a trophy, I still feel like this is a success for Madrid if he is able to lay that groundwork again for success over the next couple of years, which he did the first time.
I remember this period we were talking about when Mourinho came in. Before he came in, Barcelona were very dominant because of the quality of players they have, the likes of David Villa, like you mentioned, the likes of Messi. It's more like Barcelona were fully dominating everything. Mourinho came, and after the first season, he couldn't break that dominance. The next season, he was able to break the dominance, and that was how Real Madrid were able to win the league that year. I think it was 2011. Is it 2011, 2012?
That's right.
Yeah, that was when the Real Madrid were able to win the league. But before then, I think he won the Copa del Rey. Before the next season, he came and won the league. So Mourinho is a serial winner. Yeah, he's a serial winner. And that's one thing I like about him. He has this winning mentality. He tries to inculcate players. You just have to win. You can't lose. Yep. That's the way he operates.
It'll be really interesting. I mean, I think that, again, it'll take time. This Madrid team, there's a lot of things going on. All right, George, I'm actually going to close out the show with our standard questions. Number one, is Mourinho going to succeed at Madrid? Number two, do you feel like any of the big stars at Madrid that we've mentioned today, Vinicius, Mbappe, Tchouaméni, Valverde, are going to have to leave Madrid this summer? Number three, which players do you see them bringing in to fit whatever holes they have in the squad? George and I talked about one particular hole. There's a lot of players that could fit that. Let us know your thoughts. Thank you for listening.